The padlock was a Slaymaker No. 4, steel shackled, and the man who put it there did it on a Thursday morning in September of 1960 while Dottie Marsh was still inside. She heard the chain go through the door handle. She heard the click. And then she stood at her own front window and watched him walk back to his truck. It was Route 66. 12 miles east of Seligman, Arizona, the diner sat on the south shoulder of the road, the way a thing sits when it has always been there, low and flat-roofed. The hand-lettered sign still reading Marshes in green paint, the chrome stools just visible through the glass. The kind of place where truckers stopped without thinking about it, the way water finds a certain spot on a slope. A man named Cal Truesdale had been parking his rig there every Tuesday for 7 years and ordering biscuits with gravy and a coffee that Dottie kept refilling without being asked. The notice had come 6 weeks earlier. 6 weeks of trying, of calling a cousin in Flagstaff, of letters to a bank in Prescott that was polite every time and helpful. None of the diner had been in her name and her late husband Ray's name since 1949. Ray went out to check the water pump one February morning in 1957 and didn't come back in. The county coroner said it was his heart. Dottie said it was the cold. Either way, she had run the counter alone for 3 years and 4 months after that. The kind of running that does not advertise, that simply continues because there are bills and because there is nowhere else to be. The notice was for $1,940. 3 months of back payments to the equipment lender, compounded with a 9% penalty clause that the original paperwork made look small, and the final accounting did not. She had $410 in the account her and Ray had kept at First Federal. She had a gas range worth perhaps $200 to a buyer. She had the building itself, which was mortgaged. The man who brought the padlock was not cruel about it. That was the thing. He was a representative from a holding company in Phoenix, polite as a dentist, with a folder on the seat of his truck and a form she had already signed, or a form that represented a thing she had signed, something downstream of the original paperwork. He said he was sorry. He said it in the tone of a man who has said it before and means it in a general way, the way you mean it about weather. Dottie did not argue. She went out the back and sat on the concrete step where she and Ray used to drink their coffee in the evenings when the road was quiet. And she sat there with her hands folded and listened to the chain go through the door handle. She was still there 40 minutes later when a car pulled off the highway. Here is the story. Dorothy Alice Marsh had come to Route 66 the same way most things came to it in those years, by following a man who believed in the road. Ray Marsh had driven a stretch of it in 1945 on his way back from the Pacific, through Seligman and Ash Fork and Kingman, and he told her about it the way men talk about a place that got inside them. They bought the parcel in 1948, with $200 they had saved in a coffee can, and borrowed the rest from Ray's uncle in Winslow. They built the counter themselves. Ray and his brother Cecil poured the concrete floor on a Saturday in April of 1949 and scratched their initials in the corner near the door, where nobody could see it unless they knew to look. She had made the coffee every morning since the day they opened. 6 a.m., the same amount, the same pot. 11 years and a few months of mornings. She knew the regulars by their orders and by their news, and by what they didn't say. She knew that Cal Truesdale's daughter had gotten a scholarship to Arizona State in the spring, and that he was trying not to show how proud he was. She knew that the Navarro brothers, who hauled freight up from Kingman, had a mother in a care facility in Williams that one of them visited every Sunday without fail, and neither of them mentioned. She knew the road, and she knew the people on it. And she had kept the counter 7 days a week for 11 years. Because that was what you did with the thing you believed in. Ray had believed in it too, until February of 1957. She did not close for his funeral. She closed the morning of, opened again the afternoon. There was no one to run the coffee machine but her. That was the world as it stood when the chain went through the door handle on that Thursday morning in September of 1960. Cal Truesdale had pulled in that morning at his usual time, 8:15, before the padlock. He did not understand at first what he stood at the front door with one hand on it and read the notice that had been taped to the glass, a legal document, typed, with the name of the holding company at the top, and then stood back from it the way you stand back from something you want to be different. There were 2 other cars already in the lot. A woman named Agnes Pfeiffer from Seligman, who had stopped for her regular cup on her way to work, stood reading the same notice. A man in a Conoco hat stood beside her. Nobody went around back. Nobody knew Dottie was still there. They stood in the parking lot the way people stand when the ordinary thing has been taken out from under them and they don't know what the next move is. Agnes said something. The Conoco man said something back. Cal looked at the padlock, and then looked at the road, and then looked at the padlock again. A green Plymouth station wagon was parked at the far end of the lot, off to the side, engine off. It had been there when Cal arrived. He hadn't thought about it. The man who had been leaning against it was watching the 3 of them now, arms folded, hat pulled down against the He had the kind of stillness that comes from being accustomed to waiting, not impatient, not restless. Just watching the way a man watches a thing he is still deciding about. Nobody recognized him yet. If you've ever watched a place that mattered to people get shut down by a piece of paper from a company nobody chose, drop your state in the comments. I want to see how far this story reaches. It was the boots that did it, not the padlock, not the notice, not the 3 people standing in a parking lot off Route 66 at 8:30 on a Thursday morning with nowhere to go. The man had seen all of that, and it had moved across his face the way things move across the face of someone who has been paying attention and is not yet through. But when Cal Truesdale, after standing there a long time, took off his hat and sat down on the front step of the locked diner, just sat down on the step. The way a man sits when there is nothing else to do, the other man straightened up from the Plymouth. He walked across the lot the way he walked across every set he had ever worked on. Not fast. Not performing, just walking with a particular certainty, the kind that comes from a man who has already done the hard part of whatever is about to happen, even if no one else knows what that is yet. He went around the back of the building. Dottie Marsh was still on the concrete step, hands folded, not crying because she had done that earlier and was past it now. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. He came around the corner and stopped and looked at her for a moment without saying anything, and she looked up at him. He was a large man, in a canvas jacket and dark trousers, trail dust on the boots, a battered tan Stetson. He looked like a man who worked outdoors and was comfortable with silence. He sat down on the step beside her, not across from her, not stand beside her, the way a person sits when they are not in any particular hurry and have something they intend to say. "How much?" he said. Not a question. Just 2 words, said quietly, in the register of a man who has been told no several times and is not particularly moved by that. Dottie told him about the She told him about the $410 in the account and the equipment lender in Phoenix and the form with the clause she hadn't understood. She told him about Ray. She did not know why she was telling a stranger about Ray, but it came out. He listened to all of it. "You got paper inside?" She said she did. He stood up. "Find a way to get that door open. We're going to write down exactly what's owed." She looked at him for a moment. She started to say something about the padlock, about the holding company, about the form she had already signed. He looked at her the way a man looks at a thing that is not, in his estimation, the real problem. "I have a problem," he said, "and you can fix it. I've been driving since 4 this morning, and I need coffee, and I'm not going to get it with a padlock on the door." Something moved across Dottie's face. Not quite a smile. Something older than a smile. She went and found her duplicate key, the one she kept in a coffee can near the back door. He had driven up from Kingman. He was 2 days out from a location shoot in Utah and had taken 66 for the quiet of it. The way men sometimes take a road they don't need to, because the other road has too much in it. He had a crew call at Paramount the following Monday. He wrote the check on the hood of the Plymouth in the parking lot, in front of Cal Truesdale and Agnes Pfeiffer and the man in the Conoco hat, who by then had figured out who he was, but had the sense not to say it out loud. The check was for $2,200, not $1,840. When Dottie said something about the difference, he folded the checkbook and put it in his jacket pocket. "Ray built this floor," he said. "Least it ought to have a few months' cushion." She didn't know how he knew about Ray. She never asked. Later she thought maybe Cal had told him when he came around the back, but Cal always said he hadn't. "I've owed this road a great deal for a long time," the man said. "Call it a debt that's past due." He drank his coffee. He left $1 on the counter. He drove west on Route 66 toward Kingman and was gone by 10 o'clock. The man from the holding company came back 2 days later. The check had cleared through an account in Los Angeles. He looked at the deposit slip the way a man looks at a thing that has rearranged his morning without asking permission, and then he drove back to Phoenix. The padlock stayed in his truck. He never used it. Dottie Marsh kept the diner open for another 19 years. She paid off the equipment lender in full by the spring of 1962. She paid off the mortgage on the building in 1968, 9 years early, and on the afternoon the letter came confirming it. She went out to the concrete step behind the diner and sat there alone for a while. She made the coffee every morning at 6 a.m. for 19 more years, 7 days a week. The same amount, the same pot. Cal Truesdale stopped in every Tuesday until 1971, when his route changed. He brought his daughter in once, the spring after she started at Arizona State. Dottie gave her the coffee on the house and told her to study hard and mean it. By the time Dottie retired in 1979, she had served somewhere close to 400,000 cups of coffee by her own rough, accounting a number she mentioned once to a reporter from a Kingman newspaper who was doing a piece on Route 66 diners, then waved off as an exaggeration even though it wasn't. Her son Robert took over the diner in 1979 and ran it until the interstate traffic shifted in 1986. He kept the building. He and his wife Carol turned it into a small gift shop for travelers on the historic highway in 1991, and they kept the counter and the chrome stools because Robert said his mother would not forgive him if he pulled them. In the corner of the concrete floor near the front door, if you knew to look, you could still see 2 sets of initials from April of 1949. R.M. and C.M. Ray Marsh and Cecil Marsh, pressed into the concrete on a Saturday afternoon when the road outside was quiet and the whole thing was still just a belief. Robert kept the original check framed on the wall behind the counter until the gift shop. His daughter Patricia, who grew up behind that counter and went to Northern Arizona University on a scholarship in 1983, took it down when they cleared out the building. She wrapped it in a kitchen towel and put it in a box with the green coffee can and the duplicate key and the dollar bill, slightly worn, that Dottie had kept under the register all those years without it. The box is in Patricia's house in Flagstaff now, on a shelf in the back room where the morning light comes in. Some days the light moves across it for a while and then moves on, and the box just sits there the way things sit when they have lasted. John Wayne never told anyone. Not to a director. Not to a co-star. Not in any interview. Not in any letter. Not in any piece of correspondence anybody ever turned up. The man from the holding company did not know the name on the check until he looked it up. Cal Truesdale knew what he saw in the parking lot, and he told his daughter about it 30 years later, the week because he said he had been carrying it long enough. There is a kind of man who notices the people that a room has decided not to see, who does not wait to be asked and does not explain himself afterward, who sits down on a concrete step beside someone because that is the right place to be, and who frames every act of decency as a debt he owes rather than a gift he gives. That is the measure. Not the $2,200 written on the hood of a Plymouth in a parking lot off Route 66. The measure is sitting down beside somebody. The measure is the step. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe if you haven't yet. There are more stories like this one, and every one of them deserves to be told. And unfortunately, they don't make men like John